Hello and welcome to Holden's Brewery. My name is Debbie and we're going to try something a little bit different today. Normally all you lovely people will come to our brewery and I will show you around to show you how the brewery of the beer is created, but also to give you a little bit of black country history and how the Holden's family fit into all of that. However, because of the way we've had to change our lives, we're going to do a virtual brewery tour, and along the way hopefully we'll taste some of the delicious beers that are brewed here. Firstly, let me just tell you a little bit about the Holden's family. Edwin Holden was born in 1875 and he was the youngest of 7 brothers, and as was common at the time, you followed in your family footsteps. So unfortunately for Edwin, they were bootmakers, which although is very important, to him it was extremely boring and he didn't want to do it. He was very much the life and soul of the party. This revelation came upon him when he met Lucy, who would eventually be his wife. And her father worked for Atkinson's Brewery at the time, and he saw the potential in Edwin to make a go of this business. So in 1915, the Holden's family of Edwin and Lucy brought this land here and this brewery for 750 guineas, which, to give you an example, to buy that today, you would have to put a lot of zeros after that, 750. So as I say, you would have to add a lot of zeros to that 750 in order to be able to purchase this land, plus the tap house, which is next door. The Holden's family have gone from strength to strength, and we still have a member of the Holden's family running this brewery, 4th generation Jonathan. And it's a testament of its strength and how they fit in with the local community to how successful that they are. But less about that for a little minute and let's make some beer. So how do we make the beer? It's a bit like anything really. It's a bit like if you're making an omelette, for example. Some people like them with cheese in, some people like them plain, and beer's no different, believe it or not. But what happens is we have to find a combination of flavours. Flavours that taste possibly nice to one person but not another. Over here is our mash tun, and this is the first piece of equipment that we will use. We need to find a combination of seeds. And how do we do that? We need a source of sugar. How are we going to do that? What we do is we harvest the grains, we harvest the wheat, if some people use wheat, or the barley, to turn it into barley malt. What happens is the grain is spread out, we soak it in water and we let it germinate. And as it germinates, inside each of those seeds it's full of starch at the moment, but as it germinates it converts that starch into sugar to form the roots and to form the stems. It's a bit like, I don't know if you've ever tried it, it's a bit like if you've had a sack of potatoes and you've let it go a long time and they start to form roots. If you think to yourself, oh, you know, I'm not going to waste them, I'm going to use them, if you peel those spuds and you use them, you will find whatever you make with it, whether it's mash or chips, they will taste slightly sweet. And they taste slightly sweet because all the starch that's in that potato has been converted into sugar in order to create those roots. And that's the same as what we do with the grain. So it's full of sugar, which we then mill down to burst open all the seeds so that we can get as much yield out of each seed as possible. Okay, so the seeds that we use, there's loads and loads of different species, and they all create a different colour, a different flavour for the beer. We've got different ones here, dark ones, chocolate malts, crystal malts, which are very light, different sizes and different shades, as you can see. And all that basically happens is Jonathan, for example, will sit there and think, I'm going to create a new beer. Well, that grain creates that kind of flavour and that kind of colour. That's another one. This is a different one. And he decides in a very small batch what would taste the most by simply just brewing small amounts of the beer and tasting them to see what they taste like. When he's happy, then he'll expand the amount so that we can then make a larger amount of beer. In our mash tun, which is here, we would use 3/4 of a ton of the mixture of the grains that we need. We then fill it up to the top with hot water, not boiling, hot. I have to say though, I'm not going to be giving away any specifics, because if I did, they would probably kill me, because it's a straight secret. Any brewer will keep his recipes close to his heart. So we fill up this mash tun to the top, put our dried material in, and then we let it soak in the hot water. We let it steep. What other drink do we let steep? Cup of tea. If you make it right, you put a brew on and you let it mash. You let it brew, and so that all the lovely flavours and the colours, and most importantly the sugar, is then removed out of the grain. When we're happy that we've used a lot of that, what we would then do is pump it out from the bottom. But there's still a lot of yield in that grain, and we don't want to waste it. So what happens is, as we pump it out, there's a bar over here, which we're going to show you in a minute. There's a bar across the top that looks a bit like an upside down lawn sprinkler. And as it spins around like this, it's called sparging. It sprays right down onto the grist, which is the dried material at the bottom, and it flushes out the rest of the yield, because as I say, we don't want to waste any. The liquor, as it is now called, is then pumped into the copper, which is the next piece of it where we're going to go next. And then the dried material very often goes off for animal food, so that we don't waste it. Okay, let's have a close-up of our mash tun. If you recall, I said we fill it up with hot water, all our grain goes in, and we let it steep. We let it brew, just like we do with a proper cup of tea if you make it right. If you can see, we've got a segmented bottom, and across the top you can see the pipe. Remember, that's our upside down lawn sprinkler that sprays the hot water on top of the dried material so we can get all that yield out. But if we have a little bit of a close-up, if you can see the centre, it looks a bit like a pizza, doesn't it? You can see the little numbers that are stamped into each one. If ever you look at something and you think, oh, well, I wonder how old that is, and you don't particularly want an exact age, you can kind of roughly tell how old something is, and that's a clue. I can tell just from looking at that, it wasn't made by a computer or a laser, it was made by hand with somebody looking after it. And that's why they number all the segments. Because with the little imperfections, because it was made by hand, if you didn't number the segments, it would probably take you a week and a half to put it back together again after it's been taken apart to be cleaned. If you remember, we've got our liquor in here that's then pumped out as wort, because that's what we call it. It's wort now, because all wort is water with the sugar out the grain, the colour out the grain, and the flavour out the grain. But of course, water can be really important with your beer, depending on where your water comes from. For example, in Burton, they've got a lot of gypsum in their water, and that lends itself really nicely to the darker ales. That's also why Julia Hanson, who was another brewer here in Dudley, made a lovely drop of mild, because of the borehole she took the water from, was high in gypsum. Right, before we go any further, let's try a bit of beer. The first one we're going to try is our Golden Pale Ale. It's our generic bitter. It's nice and gentle, it's not too hoppy, if you like that sort of thing. Now remember, when you're pouring your beer, always pour it at an angle. Because cask ale shouldn't have a massive great big head on it. And actually, if ever you go to a pub and they drop the beer from a great height and give you a great big head, refuse to drink it. Because it actually changes the way it tastes. It's a bit like, you know, if you drank a glass of distilled water and a glass of sparkling water, but you let that sparkling water go flat and then taste it, you can still taste which one was the sparkling water. And that's because of the carbon dioxide in it. So if ever they give you a pint, or half a pint, that's got a massive head, by the time you get down to your table, it'll be as flat as an old punk egg. So don't drink it. So, cheers. Let's taste it. I will warn you, my face will screw up. It's only because the hops in it makes me a little bit... So, you know it's going to be good if our face looks like a tube toffee. Okay? Cheers. Lovely. Enjoy.